In the depths of winter, 1547, whispers spread through the stone corridors of Whitehall Palace. England's most feared monarch lay dying, his massive body consumed by disease and decay. For nearly 4 decades, Henry VIII had ruled with absolute authority, reshaping his nation's religion, executing wives and nobles, and bending England to his iron will. Now, in the flickering candlelight of his chamber, that power was slipping away. The man gasping for breath bore little resemblance to the prince who had ascended the throne in 1509. That 18-year-old had been celebrated across Europe as the embodiment of Renaissance ideals. Athletic, handsome, intellectually gifted, contemporary accounts praised his skill at jousting, his passion for music and theology, his commanding physical presence. Foreign ambassadors had marveled at the young king's vigor and charm. But by January 1547, Henry was unrecognizable. His body had expanded to an estimated 400 pounds, requiring mechanical hoists and specially reinforced furniture. His legs were covered in suppurating ulcers that released such a foul odor that courtiers struggled not to recoil in his presence. His once handsome face had grown distorted and bloated, the skin taking on a sickly yellow pallor. Modern medical historians believe he suffered from type 2 diabetes, severe gout, and likely osteomyelitis, a devastating bone infection. The transformation from golden prince to grotesque invalid had not happened overnight. In 1536, Henry suffered a catastrophic jousting accident that left him unconscious for hours. The lance strike and subsequent fall from his heavily armored horse likely caused traumatic brain injury. More significantly, the wound to his leg never properly healed, developing into chronic ulcers that would torment him for the remaining 11 years of his life. These physical ailments were accompanied by profound psychological changes. Henry's temperament, never mild, deteriorated into explosive rage, alternating with periods of confused lethargy. His paranoia intensified. His decision-making grew increasingly erratic. Yet even as death approached, Henry remained acutely aware of the political chessboard. His third wife, Jane Seymour, had died, giving him what he desperately needed, a male heir. But 9-year-old Edward was frail, and powerful factions were already maneuvering to control the boy king. The conservative Catholic Duke of Norfolk competed against Protestant reformers led by Edward Seymour. The young prince's uncle, Henry, paranoid to the end, signed execution orders even as his hand trembled with the effort. The king's deteriorating condition remained one of England's most closely guarded state secrets. Royal proclamations continued to describe Henry as healthy and active, while the reality was far grimmer. Those granted access to the royal bedchamber encountered a macabre scene: the enormous bed draped in dark fabrics, burning incense barely masking the sweet stench of decay. And at the center, the mountainous form of England's once mighty king. Palace servants reported hearing screams echoing through Whitehall's stone passages. The leg ulcers caused such excruciating pain that even slight movement triggered paroxysms of agony. Royal physicians applied poultices containing everything from boiled onions to powdered minerals, desperate remedies from classical medical texts that provided no relief. More effective was liberal use of opium, which dulled the pain but further clouded Henry's deteriorating mind. The psychological torment matched the physical. This man had been the most powerful figure in England, his word literally life or death for any subject. Now he found himself helpless against the betrayal of his own flesh. Court records indicate increasingly erratic behavior, moments of delirium when he rambled about ghosts of executed rivals, lucid periods when he obsessively reviewed his will, determined to control his dynasty even from beyond the grave. Contemporary observers noted with alarm how Henry vacillated between religious positions during these final weeks. Having broken from Rome to establish himself as head of the Church of England, he now seemed tormented by spiritual doubts. He would demand Catholic rituals one day, then reaffirm Protestant principles the next. His personal chaplain recorded how the king would awaken in terror from nightmares, though we should approach such accounts with appropriate scholarly caution, as they may reflect the recorder's own religious agenda. The impending royal death created a dangerous power vacuum. The Privy Council fractured into competing factions, each maneuvering for advantage in the coming regency. Even in his weakened state, Henry remained dangerous. Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, who had survived decades of court intrigue, suddenly found himself sentenced to death for treason, though he would ultimately survive when Henry died before the execution could be carried out. January 27, 1547, marked Henry's final collapse. Witnesses reported a seizure so violent that attendants had to restrain him to prevent injury. When the episode passed, Henry struggled to speak. His right side partially paralyzed, clear evidence of what modern medicine identifies as a massive stroke. Court physicians, aware that failing to save the king could mean their own deaths, worked frantically with the limited tools available to Tudor medicine. Access to the royal bedchamber remained strictly controlled by Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop of Canterbury. This secrecy served practical purposes beyond mere dignity. Premature news of the king's death could trigger power grabs or even foreign invasion. Cranmer ensured that only essential attendants entered, each sworn to absolute silence. Even Queen Catherine Parr, Henry's sixth and surviving wife, was kept at a distance during critical periods. The king drifted between consciousness and coma as the hours passed. During brief lucid moments, attendants reported Henry expressing growing terror about divine judgment. The man who had executed 2 wives, numerous nobles, and thousands of common subjects now faced his own mortality with increasing dread. According to court records, he was heard mumbling prayers in his sleep, a stark contrast to the unyielding autocrat who had reshaped England's religious landscape through sheer force of will. Extraordinary measures were taken to preserve Henry's remaining dignity. As bodily functions failed, teams of servants worked in shifts managing the increasingly difficult tasks of cleaning and moving the massive royal body. The leg ulcers had grown so severe that bone was reportedly visible through necrotic tissue. The stench became so overwhelming that windows were flung open despite the winter cold whenever the king lost consciousness. By January 28, even the pretense of possible recovery could no longer be maintained. Archbishop Cranmer was summoned urgently as Henry's breathing became labored. Contemporary Protestant accounts describe how the king, unable to speak, was asked to squeeze Cranmer's hand if he placed his faith in Christ. Henry reportedly squeezed with his remaining strength before slipping into his final coma, though historians debate whether this detail reflects genuine events or later Protestant propaganda. Henry VIII died before dawn on January 28, 1547. The official cause was recorded simply as natural decay, though modern medical analysis suggests a lethal combination of heart failure, sepsis from infected wounds, and complications from probable type 2 diabetes. He was 55 years old. More remarkable than the death itself was the extraordinary conspiracy of silence that followed. The Privy Council suppressed the news for 3 full days while consolidating power around young Edward VI. This delay proved crucial. While Henry's body lay cooling, Edward Seymour moved with ruthless efficiency to secure control, holding secret meetings and neutralizing potential rivals before the public announcement on January 31. The disposal of Henry's remains presented unique challenges. Court records document that the royal corpse began decomposing with alarming speed, likely due to advanced infections already present. The coffin required special construction to accommodate his enormous girth, measuring nearly twice the width of a standard noble's casket. During the lining state at Whitehall, the line-lined coffin reportedly split under pressure from gases, though this macabre detail was hastily covered up by court officials. The funeral procession to Windsor Castle on February 16 provided one final display of Tudor power. Black-draped horses pulled the massive coffin through streets lined with mourners. At St. George's Chapel, Henry was laid to rest beside Jane Seymour, the only wife who had given him a son and the only one spared the experience of falling from royal favor by dying before Henry's affections could wane. Henry's will revealed his final attempts to control the future from beyond the grave. The document meticulously laid out the succession. First Edward, then Mary, finally Elizabeth. This clear line, though briefly interrupted by Lady Jane Grey's 9-day reign, would eventually be followed exactly as Henry specified. His posthumous grip on England would extend through all 3 of his children. The medical legacy of Henry's final days continues to fascinate researchers. His symptoms have been retrospectively studied as evidence of various conditions, with type 2 diabetes complicated by chronic osteomyelitis emerging as the most compelling diagnosis. His case provides valuable insights into Tudor medical practices, revealing an approach that combined ancient Galenic medicine with emerging Renaissance techniques, all ultimately futile against the diseases consuming him. Henry's death marked a crucial turning point in English history. The complex religious position he had established breaking with Rome while maintaining many Catholic practices created an ambiguous legacy that fueled conflicts throughout his children's reigns. The man who had dominated England for nearly 4 decades left behind a transformed nation, forever changed by his desperate quest for a male heir and his willingness to reshape church and state to achieve it. In the end, Henry VIII's terrifying final days reflected the same ruthless calculation that had defined his reign. Even facing death, he worked to control succession, eliminate rivals, and secure his dynasty's future. The Golden Prince had become a grotesque tyrant, but his grip on power remained unshakable until his final breath.